Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode 143, where we are going to talk about how to like your partner. But first, most importantly, I want to ask you, how are you today? I hope you're really well. I myself am doing well, although it's terribly gloomy and yucky weather out there. But I am feeling happy to be here doing one of my favorite things, which is speaking with you via this podcast episode. And on that note, if you have been enjoying the podcast, there are a few little ways that you could give just a little bit back. The first one is to simply subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and then review the podcast. It only takes a couple minutes of your time, but it makes a big difference to this podcast and how many people it reaches. It helps the podcast be more successful. It helps those people whose ears it reaches have better lives and marriages as highly sensitive people. So that's an amazing, simple, easy way to kind of pay it forward. The second way is to become a podcast supporter. And when you do this, you actually get something big in return, which is that Highly Sensitive, Happily Married podcast map, which will help you find the exact podcast episodes that will most help you in your unique situation, in your unique marriage right away. So you don't have to just try and guess. There's over 140 episodes at this point, so there's many to sort through. The podcast map will make it so much easier and direct you right to the podcasts that are best for you. And not only that, but when you become a podcast supporter by donating just a bit, you get to choose as little as $3 or more if you feel moved to donate more. It really helps this podcast be sustainable for the long term. And you can feel really good about making a difference in that way. And the podcast team and I will just appreciate you so deeply. To do that and get the podcast map, head over to www.lifeisworthloving.com/support the podcast. You can also find that link in the show notes. All right, let's dive in, shall we? So I know that deep down, probably all of you listening really do love your partner. But it might feel sometimes like you don't like him very much. Yeah? Ever had that experience? I can totally relate. And I know that it is not the greatest feeling. I, myself, have not always liked my husband either. Of course, I've always known that deep down I really love him. But sometimes liking him has felt harder. And when I say liking, I mean like enjoying him, like enjoying being around him, right? And I know that not liking and not enjoying being around him, this can be a common occurrence in long-term intimate relationships. Most of us, and this may be even more true for highly sensitive people, can tend to feel annoyed or irritated or bothered by our partner, at least at times, if not really frustrated and resentful and all those other hard emotions that we can experience in our relationships. Hurt, angry, right? And when we're feeling any of that, we are definitely not liking our partner in that moment. And if you haven't experienced this not liking feeling in your relationship, it's likely because your relationship is on the newer side. So listen in to prevent it from happening in the future, this not liking thing. So up until somewhat recently, I actually had grown kind of used to irritation or annoyance being a somewhat common experience in my marriage. Like, I'd worked a lot on having it not be there or minimizing it, right? And I even have an early podcast episode all about how to do that. But I had accepted that the times I still was feeling annoyed or irritated, I had accepted them, right? Like I'd gotten to the point where it really didn't feel like such a big deal if I sometimes felt that way. I could still tap into my love for him too, even if I was feeling annoyed. So this, of course, was great progress from feeling that way a ton, where I did go through a phase of that. Or from the times I used to think that something was really wrong if I felt irritated or bothered by my husband. Or those times when I thought, well, if I'm irritated with him, maybe I don't really love him enough, or he isn't the right partner for me, right? I used to feel that especially at certain times of a month. Some of you may have the same experience. So, feeling those ways can feel really terrible and can be kind of scary. I had grown way beyond that, like feeling acceptance of annoyance as a normal part of relationships was a much better place to be. It was definite progress. So I was feeling pretty peaceful with that experience in my marriage. So it was a really incredibly happy surprise one day when I just suddenly realized that it had been months of really feeling like I like my husband. Like, it just dawned on me. We have been laughing a lot. We've been connecting a lot in silly, playful ways throughout our days. Like, whether he's around or whether he's out in the world, he oftentimes will text me silly texts or send me funny memes or share a random tidbit about his day, like, oh, I'm listening to this podcast and it's cracking me up. And I might reply with a goofy emoji or share a tidbit about my day. And it's just been really fun and silly and light. Or we'll have nice connecting conversations here and there throughout the workday. He's been working from home mostly lately. So instead of being annoying, it's actually been fun. We've just been having a lot of laughter and it's been wonderful. And of course, we love each other, but it's just been especially amazing to know that, of course, we love each other, but to also feel that we genuinely enjoy and like each other. I mean, what a delight to realize that I genuinely, deeply love this person I decided to spend the rest of my life with, right? And of course, to also deeply love him. Like, that's just extra good. So I can imagine that some of you listening might be wondering, did Hannah just get here by some stroke of luck? Or is she just lucky that she's got someone in her life who she can just like that? And my answer to that is a big fat no. It is not about luck. We had to work through the things that normally challenge or even divide couples. My husband and I had to work through our patterns and our conflicts over and over again. And luckily, of course, I have the skills to do so effectively, which has helped him develop those skills as well, right? So he didn't just come into the relationship knowing how to do this. No, not at all. So much of it was because of me and what I'm going to share with you today. So what has made that possible is the question, right? Feeling all this enjoyment of him lately did make me really curious and, of course, want to share. So I got curious about what has made this possible for my husband and I. And I took kind of a closer inventory about what I have done over the years to make this possible. And truth be told, everything I share in this podcast is part of it, right? All 140 some episodes, right? And of course, everything that I teach that's even deeper and more detailed in my program Treasured are what added up to, like, doing those things, living those things, are what added up to truly liking and enjoying my husband. But I wanted today to give you 6 of the biggest things. Or maybe I should say 6 of the things that felt important as I was looking at how I created this in my marriage. 6 things that today feel worthy of special attention. So, are you ready to hear them? The first one, to help me really like my husband and for us to have this joy together regularly, is that I was willing to practice the 180-degree pivot with dedication and gusto. So what this means is over the years together, I have learned that no one can solve my marriage struggles for me. No one but me can make my problems or irritations or dislike of my husband or things he does disappear. At least not without my deeply active participation. Like, not him, not some hero rescuer out there. No one but me is going to be able to do this. So I have been very, very willing, this is the part here to listen to look at the places in myself that are stopping me from feeling good around my husband and with him. I have not held back on self-honesty and willingness to see where I might be blocking happiness with him, where I might be creating more unhappiness with him. Because, of course, we pretty much all do that. We all block our own happiness with our person to some degree, simply because of the fact that we have a human brain that doesn't always see clearly, that spins stories, that makes meaning, that projects hurt, that creates disconnection. That's part of what we have in our human systems. Like, it's part of being a human. We do that. So it's important to be able to recognize when we do that, where we do that, take ownership of it, and do something about it. So, in other words, I was really willing to take ownership and to take every opportunity to look at where I could shift internally to have a better experience with him. I guess I should say where I could shift internally and externally to have a better experience with him. And so once I saw where I was part of contributing to the challenges I felt, I have been willing to put in work on myself, including how to not take things so personally, how to think about things in a way that actually fuels more fondness of him and less frustration or disappointment in him, etc. Like, so much is here. I've especially been willing to deeply work with my thoughts and my feelings and my nervous system and how lovingly I relate to myself. And I've been willing to learn how to do that deeply, right? So these are, of course, the things we dive into deeply when I work with clients in Treasured and the Foundations of Emotional Well-Being for HSPs, which is at this point a bonus course that you get when you sign up and join Treasured. Like, everything I teach, all the deep emotional internal work that stops me from blocking my happiness with him and opens the door to more happiness with him, I have done that work and I keep doing that work. And I called this doing that 180-degree pivot because it is about coming back to what you can change, what I can change within myself, right? What you can change within yourself, not what you can change in your partner, not what I could change in my husband, right? So that's such important work. And it's multifaceted. But the willingness to learn it and do it has been completely key for me in getting to this amazing place with my husband. All right, the second thing that I've done is to make sure I spend plenty of time in my own mind thinking about my husband positively, seeing the good in him, choosing to focus on what I like and love in him. I call this love on purpose, and this is actually one of the main pillars that we dive into when I work with clients in Treasured. So important. Like, this is so key to liking and loving your partner. This intentional internal focus on what we like and love and appreciate in our partner. I also made sure that my husband and I had plenty of time for enjoyment and fun connection times, like activities together, time not addressing issues or troubleshooting the relationship, right? So I have been intentional about asking for it and planning it and carving it out. Sometimes it has been hard and sometimes it wasn't doable, like not all the time, right? We have 3 kids and so much going on, like all of you, I'm sure. But we rarely skip out on this and have almost always made this a non-negotiable, regular part of our week for almost every week for years. And it's never too late to do this. And on to number 3. Similarly, we've spent lots of time learning to not take things too seriously, like lightening up about life, about all things relationship. For example, I've spent a lot of time lightening up about my husband's emotions and reactions, not taking those too seriously, and about my own emotions and reactions, right? And at this point, he and I are both pretty good at laughing at ourselves and our humanness. We joke about ourselves. We find being human kind of funny. Yes, serious as well, but also funny. And part of what has helped with that is understanding male and female differences, how our brains are different, how we as humans are shaped and conditioned differently than each other, how our brains in general just work as humans and how our nervous systems work, and accepting that this is how humans are instead of fighting it. Like, this shouldn't be how he is or how I am, right? Like, I've certainly been there. We call that fighting reality, fighting the reality of being a human. And I think many of us do that, and it makes things hard. So when we accept that this is how we are, that really has freed me up to feel light about some of these things that I might otherwise take very seriously, and even to find humor and joy and connection in it. And another thing that's really helped me do this, to take things more lightly, is like I said in the first and second thing, which is it's really entailed choosing how I think about things on purpose, right? Instead of taking it so seriously as my sensitive brain automatically wants to do, right? And it's meant working with my emotions and my nervous system. So again, that's a lot of deep learning I've done over the years. And I could go into much more depth on all of these, and I have in the podcast, and go even more deeply in my programs. But one thing that I do especially want to point out here is that knowing how to regulate your nervous system, especially as a highly sensitive person, so you can be more in what we call the calm and connect part of your nervous system, is so key for being able to kind of take a light approach to life and relationships. The calm and connect place is what allows us to be playful and light and feel good and connected. And right, we can't be playful if we're all stressed out. We can't take life lightly if we're completely stressed out in fight or flight or freeze mode. So this is one of the reasons I give this course at this point, that my Foundations of Emotional Wellbeing course for HSPs, that's part now of what you get when you sign up for Treasured, because it teaches you how to guide yourself back and stay in the calm and connect part of your nervous system most of the time, which will make lightening up about life and having a lot more fun and joy in your relationship so much easier. All right, the fourth thing that I have done to like my husband as much as I do these days is I have been very willing to bring things to him that I couldn't necessarily change on my own, and ask for his support in a kind way, in a way that got through to him, which I've talked about a lot on this podcast. And that has meant doing my internal work first so that I could deliver and communicate in the most successful ways these requests, these desires for help, right? So I could make requests for him to do things differently in a way that he could actually hear and want to honor and work with me on. Yeah. So an example here is my husband. It's no news to probably those of you who've been paying close attention to the podcast, but my husband's listening skills were not the best for a long time, to say the least. He's even talked about it in one of the podcast episodes we did together. His natural tendency, even still, is to just launch into whatever his first thoughts are as I talk. So for a long time, I had a hard time getting through to him about all sorts of things, like simple things, right? Or just he'd launch into his thoughts instead of trying to listen to what I'm really saying. And so I oftentimes didn't feel heard or understood because he wasn't hearing or understanding, right? So over the years, I've shared that in a kind, loving way many times. Like, this is my experience. This is what happens. And not without nagging, right? This is not nagging, but saying it clearly and with a request for what I wanted embedded in my communication, right? And of course, a willingness, part of this has been a willingness to teach him how, to show him what it would look like to really listen, right? To model that to him. And he's gotten so much better. He's still not perfect at it, right? But he's so much better at it. And this has been true with other things. I have been willing to do this, to communicate with him in these ways over and over again in different ways with different issues, sometimes multiple times, actually often many, many times about the same issue, and offer my support in helping him navigate things a little differently. So in other words, I stayed committed to working through the things and talking through things and problem solving as a team. I stayed patient and committed. And guess what? Eventually, we have worked through almost all of the most challenging issues. And as I say that, I'm just reminded, it makes me want to reiterate that to you, of how important this is. Working through the issues from internally and between both of us, right? Like me working through them inside myself and then working through them with him when I can't just work through it on my own has been a complete game changer. And there was a fair amount to work through. Like, it has taken us a decade or so to work through some of these issues. Now, I want to make sure that doesn't sound awful, because it hasn't been. Like, along the way, there's been so much love and joy and all the good things. But what's shifted is that as we really worked through the majority of those issues, there's less and less of the hard stuff, right? We've solved so much. And I think this is why I talk about, like, our relationships, instead of getting worse and worse, like they tend to do when we don't attend to them effectively, our relationships can actually get better and better by the day. And that is how it works when you know how and what to do to create that. And that just brings me to the fifth thing that I have done, which is that I have stuck with all of this over time, again and again. And I'm going to circle back to this one in a minute in a different way. But for now, I just want to share the last thing that I want to share today. That was totally crucial for me to be able to get to this place of so truly liking and enjoying my husband, which is I got help to learn all of this. I was not naive enough to think that I could just do it on my own. I could simply not have gotten here without learning and getting coached and being guided by some wonderful teachers and coaches. And I think this is just so true with anything that we want in our lives. We have to learn and we have to get help. And for me, of course, I learned in diverse ways. I learned a lot through learning how to be a coach. I got a lot of support in that process around my relationship that way and learned so much. And so I think it might be part of why that it took me a while, because I was learning more than just about how to have an amazing relationship at the same time. Now, my clients' experience are very different. I have a very, very in-depth, concentrated, targeted program that makes it so much faster and easier than it was for me to learn all of these things. And that's what you get in my program, Treasured. But it just really am grateful to my own willingness to learn and get that help. And I am very grateful to my coaches and teachers who have made this possible. Because now my husband and I really understand each other pretty deeply now. And, most of the stuff inside me that's prevented me, the blocks to happiness with him, I've really dropped the majority of those. And over time, he's shifted the way he does things. And so we are freed up to have a lot more fun. So these 6 things are some of the specific things I've done. And of course, there are more, like learning how to deeply meet your own emotional needs instead of relying on your partner to meet those needs. That is a surefire way to not like your husband, I promise. And, developing a deeply loving and compassionate relationship with yourself is so huge. Like we talked a little bit about on the podcast last episode. Really, there are too many things to list all out that have allowed for me and that will allow for you to truly like and love your husband consistently, which of course is why I have a whole podcast and why I dive deeper into everything I teach in my program Treasured, and why coaching with me in Treasured is the very best way to truly like and love your partner and have him feel the same with you, because there we can really go target what's keeping your unique relationship from being that light, loving, fun one. And this really isn't something I can just list off to you and have you suddenly know exactly what you need to do for your unique relationship. That's going to be the most effective use of your energy and focus to make your marriage that one that you really like and love each other, right? That fun one that you're thrilled to be in. This does take time and learning and dedication and support, as it took for me. But in the most general sense, and what I really want to impress upon you most today, is that what I've found in my own relationship and what I've seen to be true in my clients' marriages too, is that the more my husband and I work through the challenging things that arise in our relationship, and the more we practice our relationship skills, and side note, many of the ones he has are because of what I have shown him, right, and guided him to be able to do. And the more we purposefully return to kindness and acceptance and patience and love and intentionally generate connection, the more all of that just happens naturally. The more we truly like each other, and less times there are of real conflict or struggle or annoyance or irritation. And the more we just have fun together and get goofy together and want to reach out for these little moments of connection throughout our day, like these texts, right, that make us both feel happy and connected with each other. And I want to really reiterate to you this 5th point that I made, which is about being patient and persistent with this. It really wasn't like things changed for me from one day to the next, even though my recognition of liking him so much did, right? That was like, oh, all of a sudden I feel like, oh, I just realized we like each other. But it was gradual. It took some time. It took some years of working through things, and it took some focus and energetic investment. Was it challenging at times? Of course. Was it fun and meaningful at times? Of course. Was it frustrating at times? Yes, totally sometimes. Was it 100% worth it? Completely. There's nothing better and laughing and hugging and joking and adventuring in both the intellectual and emotional and physical ways with the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. There's nothing better. And luckily, you can work towards the same thing in your relationship. And I do want to say it's not like my husband and I will never have hard things arise again. Of course not. I expect them. But I don't see them as obstacles so much as more opportunities to grow even closer, to learn to love and to like each other more and more as time goes by. And I know that as long as we keep doing what we've been doing, that's going to be our continued trajectory, which makes me so happy because I know I'm always going to get to have this man that I like so very much in my life as long as we both shall live. And I want that so much for you too. So if sometimes liking feels harder than loving him, and if you want to like him more and more every day, I really want to recommend for you that you do the same things that I have done. As a reminder, these are everything that I teach. And today I specifically shared these 6 things. Number 1, take every opportunity to look at things going on inside yourself that are stopping you from feeling good around your partner and learn to address those things so you can have a better experience with him. And I mean address those things inside yourself. Number 2, spend plenty of time in your mind focusing on what you like and love about him. And then do connecting activities with him. Spend connecting time together. 3, lighten up about life and relationships. 4, bring things to him that you can't necessarily change all on your own and ask for his support in a kind way, in a way that gets through to him. Side note on this one, don't start here. Most of us start here and it doesn't work because we haven't done the first part, doing that internal work. Yeah. So do the internal work first. I always think of this as the first phase. Later, when you've gotten good at that, then you can do this 4th piece more regularly. All right. The 5th piece is have patience and be persistent. Keep at it. And the last thing, number 6, is to get help with this. It really can take learning and someone to support you when it gets hard and you want to give up. Someone who can help you keep at it and make adjustments where things aren't working. When you do all of this, I promise things are progressively going to get better and better until one day you're going to look up just like I did and be like, wow, things are fun and sweet and loving like never before. And I really just can't wait for you to not just know your deep love for your partner, but also know how genuinely you like and enjoy your partner. And he feels the same with you. So if you want help with this, do not hesitate to join me in Treasured. It is currently open for enrollment on a rolling basis. That means whenever you want to, you can join. But that doesn't mean you should wait, because waiting will just keep you where you are for longer. So if you want things to feel better and better, start today. You can learn all about it and the different options you have for whether you want to include one-on-one coaching or not, etc., by going to the direct link in the show notes or finding it at my website, lifeisworthloving.com/treasured. All right, my friends, that is it for today. Be oh so well.